You know, right now, as you are listening to this audio, the device you're holding in your hand, or maybe the one sitting in your pocket, has likely already broadcasted your exact GPS coordinates to dozens of complete strangers today.
Oh, absolutely. It's happening constantly.
And it didn't even ask your permission, right? Didn't pop up a little notification. It just did it silently in the background while you went about your morning commute.
Right. The underlying infrastructure of the whole modern digital economy basically dictates that more than once every 2 minutes during your waking hours, an invisible auction fires inside that device.
Yeah, every 2 minutes.
Yeah. It packages up precisely where you are, down to the meter, attaches a unique identifier, and sends that payload out to thousands of companies you have literally never heard of.
And that reality is exactly why we're here today. We are doing a deep dive into an incredibly urgent resource. It's a brand new, completely free book titled Privacy in America: What Every American Needs to Know.
It's written by Mitch Jackson, Esquire, right?
Exactly. He's a trial lawyer with 40 years of experience fighting for consumer rights. And today, we aren't just looking at how your data is stolen. We're looking at the invisible economy that runs on it.
And exactly how you can starve that economy of your information.
Yes. Our goal is to unpack every major theme of this living, real-time resource so you understand the mechanics of the surveillance network and then give you the exact steps to lock it down.
But, before we begin, it's absolutely essential to set the parameters for this discussion, because privacy is not just some isolated technical issue.
Right. It bleeds into the physical world.
Exactly. Throughout this conversation, we are going to encounter topics that intersect with highly sensitive, politically charged realities.
Yeah, things like law enforcement surveillance, immigration enforcement by agencies like ICE, the policing of protests,
And the digital tracking of reproductive rights in a post-Dobbs legal landscape. So I want to make it crystal clear to you, the listener, that our role today is to impartially report on the factual contents, the legal frameworks, and the specific examples detailed in Mitch Jackson's research.
We are not taking political sides here.
Right, and we are not endorsing any ideological viewpoints. We're simply conveying the reality of how digital infrastructure is currently operating based on the source material.
And furthermore, this deep dive is strictly for educational purposes. Nothing we discuss today constitutes legal, financial, medical, or tax advice. You should always consult with a qualified professional regarding your own specific situation.
Perfectly said. We are just your guides through the architecture of this system.
Right. And our roadmap for this deep dive is going to move progressively deeper into your private life. We're going to start by tearing down the grand illusion of those privacy policies you blindly agree to every day.
Then we'll expose the $300 billion shadow economy of data brokers.
From there, we'll look at the spies sitting right in your living room and the ones parked in your driveway. We'll navigate the terrifying acceleration of all of this by artificial intelligence.
How the government uses commercial data to bypass the Constitution, and why the security keeping all this data safe is fundamentally broken.
And finally, we'll end with a clear 30-minute action plan to take your life back. So, to kick this off, let's look at the foundational legal environment we are operating in, because the U.S. system is entirely unique.
And not in a good way.
No, not at all. The United States is the only G7 nation on Earth without a comprehensive federal privacy law.
That is the bedrock problem, really, from which everything else we are going to discuss flows. Because while 144 other countries guarantee their citizens baseline digital privacy rights at a national level, the U.S. relies on a fractured sectoral approach.
It's basically a zip code lottery.
That's exactly what it is. Your fundamental right to own your digital identity depends entirely on where you happen to sleep at night.
Like, if you live in California, you have real enforceable rights. You can demand a company hand over a file of what they know about you. You can force them to delete it.
But if you cross state lines into Alabama or Georgia or Pennsylvania,
those rights evaporate. Zero protection. You could have a person in California and a person in Alabama who both download the exact same weather app. Their data gets stolen in the exact same server breach, and one has legal recourse while the other is just out of luck.
And we have to understand this isn't an accidental oversight. Congress has debated comprehensive privacy legislation for over 25 years.
25 years.
Yeah, and every single time the legislation dies in committee or gets watered down into oblivion. The tech and data broker industries spent more than $250 million on federal lobbying in 2024 alone.
Wow.
They view that lobbying budget as an incredibly cheap insurance policy to keep the system exactly as broken as it is. because the current system relies on a highly profitable legal fiction, the notice and consent model.
Or consent theater.
Exactly,
Okay.
consent theater.
Okay, let's unpack this because I want to play devil's advocate here for a second. If I sign a contract in the real world, say I'm buying a used car and I don't read the terms, that is entirely on me.
Right.
A judge is going to tell me I should have read the paperwork.
Yeah.
So if a website pops up the terms of service agreement and I click I agree without reading it, how is that the tech company's fault?
Well, your real-world analogy highlights exactly why the digital model is fundamentally deceptive.
Yeah.
When you buy a car, you are making a massive, infrequent transaction. You actually have time to sit down and review the paperwork.
That makes sense.
But in the digital ecosystem, you are encountering a contract every time you visit a new website, download an app, or update your phone's operating system.
It's just constant.
Right, the sheer volume makes it incomparable. To put the math on this, researchers calculated that if the average American actually read every single privacy policy they encountered in a single year, it would take them 244 hours.
Wait, really? 244 hours?
Yes, that is 76 full workdays dedicating 8 hours a day to nothing but reading legalese.
That is insane.
The aggregate cost and lost productivity nationally would be $781 billion, which is greater than the GDP of the state of Florida. The system is mathematically and cognitively impossible for humans to navigate.
So it's like being asked to sign a 100-page mortgage document just to walk through the automatic doors of a grocery store 30 times a day.
Precisely. And the corporate lawyers drafting these documents are fully aware of this impossibility. They do not write privacy policies to inform you. They write them to build an impenetrable liability shield.
Because they average, what, nearly 7,000 words?
Yeah, and they're drafted at college and postgraduate reading levels, often scoring at the difficulty level of academic journal articles. Meanwhile, the average American reads at an 8th grade level.
So when you click I agree, the company isn't securing your informed permission.
No, they are securing their evidence for a future court case to say, look, we told them we were going to track their location. They clicked yes, case closed.
And the research proves that nobody's reading them. There's this incredible academic study highlighted in the research where a team created a completely fake consent form for a new social media service.
Oh, the firstborn study.
Yes, they buried a firstborn clause deep in the text. It explicitly stated that by clicking agree, the user granted the company the legal naming rights to their firstborn child.
And 98% of people clicked agree.
They literally signed away the right to name their own baby just to get past a pop-up screen and see the app.
Which is exactly why consent theater is the only accurate term. But the industry doesn't just rely on our natural exhaustion. They actively weaponize behavioral psychology against us using what are known as dark patterns.
All right, dark patterns. Give me a concrete example of how a dark pattern mechanically works.
Let's look at trick consent, specifically a tactic called confirm shaming. Say you're trying to read an article online and a massive pop-up blocks the screen demanding your email address for a mailing list.
Oh, I hate those.
Right. And the button to accept is bright, vibrant, and easy to tap. But the option to decline isn't a simple X or a no thanks.
It's always some tiny text.
Yes, a low-contrast text link that says something emotionally manipulative, like, no thanks, I prefer paying full price, or no thanks, I don't care about my health.
Right. It's designed to make you hesitate or second-guess yourself or just accidentally click the highlighted accept button out of muscle memory.
Exactly.
Or the labyrinth they put you through just to cancel something. It takes one click and Apple Pay to sign up for a subscription, but canceling it requires a map and a compass. Mitch Jackson's research brings up Amazon's internal cancellation process for Prime. They literally named it internally, the Iliad flow.
A direct reference to the grueling 10-year Trojan War described by Homer. That is how the designers viewed the customer experience.
That's wild.
The Iliad flow forced consumers through a multi-page, multi-click gauntlet. Every page offered confusing, overlapping options, warning you of all the benefits you would lose, and constantly shifting the placement of the continue to cancel button to break your visual tracking.
It's deliberate, engineered exhaustion. So they exhaust us into clicking agree. But where does that agreement actually lead? Once I've clicked that bright green button on a flashlight app, what machinery grinds into motion?
That click opens the floodgates to the invisible middlemen of the digital economy, the data brokers. This is a $300 billion global industry.
Companies like Axiom, Epsilon, LexisNexis.
Exactly. These are massive corporations that operate entirely in the shadows. You have never visited their websites. You have never knowingly signed a terms of service agreement with them.
Yet they know everything.
Right. A company like Axiom maintains up to 10,000 unique attributes on more than 250 million individual Americans.
10,000 data points per person. How are they mechanically linking all this together? If I buy something with a credit card at a physical store, how does that connect to my digital flashlight app?
Through a process called identity resolution, they take offline public records, property deeds, marriage licenses, voting records, court documents, and they ingest them.
Yeah.
Then they buy your credit card transaction histories from financial data aggregators. Then they buy your digital exhaust, your app usage, your web browsing, your social media metadata.
And they just dish it all together.
Yes. They use anchor points like your email address, your phone number, or your device's unique advertising ID to stitch these disparate data sets together. The result is a high-resolution, constantly updating dossier of your entire life.
And then they categorize us into these incredibly predatory marketing segments. They don't just say, here's a list of 40-year-old men. They assign emotional and financial labels.
Oh, these specific labels.
The research documents marketing segments with names like suffering seniors, rural and barely making it, and depression prone.
And those lists are available for commercial purchase by virtually anyone. The World Privacy Forum conducted an extensive audit and found data brokers selling lists of people with HIV, Alzheimer's, erectile dysfunction, and severe drug addictions.
Wow.
If a predatory lender wants to target people categorized as financially desperate and impulsive, they can buy that exact demographic block for a highly targeted ad campaign.
And it costs absolutely nothing. That is what shocked me the most. We view our Social Security numbers as the ultimate keys to our identity. But on the open broker market, a Social Security number costs less than a cup of coffee.
It's incredibly cheap.
Mental health data, highly specific records showing someone has depression, PTSD, or bipolar disorder cost as little as 5.5 cents per record. My mental health history is worth a nickel to these people.
That's the terrifying reality of the market.
But earlier, you mentioned that our phones are broadcasting our location hundreds of times a day. If I just open a weather app, how exactly is my location getting to a broker? Walk me through the mechanism.
It happens through an automated infrastructure called real-time bidding, or RTB. It's the backbone of the modern digital advertising ecosystem. It functions very similarly to high-frequency stock trading, but instead of trading shares, it trades your attention and your data in milliseconds.
Okay, break that down for me. I pull out my phone, I open a free ad-supported game. What happens in the next 100 milliseconds?
The moment you open that app, there is a blank space on your screen reserved for an advertisement. The app immediately sends out what is called a bid request to an ad exchange.
And what's in that request?
It's a data payload. It contains your exact GPS coordinates, latitude and longitude, your device's unique advertising ID, your IP address, the type of phone you are using, and often demographic inferences.
So it's basically shouting my location.
Yes. The ad exchange takes this payload and broadcasts it to dozens, sometimes hundreds, of advertisers and data brokers simultaneously, essentially yelling, "We have a 35-year-old male standing inside a cardiology clinic in Chicago using an iPhone 15. Who wants to show him an ad?"
And then the advertiser's algorithms analyze that payload and bid money, fractions of a cent, to win the right to show me the ad.
Exactly. The highest bidder wins, and their ad appears on your screen before the app is even fully loaded. But here is the catastrophic privacy failure built into the RTB system. Every single company that receives your bid request gets to keep the data payload,
Wait, even if they don't win the auction?
regardless of whether they win the auction or not.
So hundreds of companies just received my exact GPS location inside a cardiology clinic. They didn't even pay to show me an ad, and they just get to legally store that location data forever.
Yes. That is the fundamental leak in the ecosystem. It is estimated that the average American's location and device data is broadcast through the RTB network 747 times every single day.
747 times.
Your phone is basically screaming your coordinates to a massive invisible crowd of strangers, and data brokers are standing in that crowd with vacuum cleaners, sucking up every broadcast to add to your permanent dossier.
If a physical human being followed you around all day, standing 3 feet behind you, noting every store you walked into, what doctor you saw, and what aisle of the pharmacy you browse, you would call the police immediately. You'd get a restraining order. Why is the digital equivalent perfectly legal.
Because the law hasn't caught up to the technology, and because, going back to consent theater, you technically agreed to this surveillance when you accepted the terms of service of the flashlight app.
Right.
The tech industry argues this data is necessary to provide you with relevant advertising. But the physical world consequences of this unregulated data market are deadly. This isn't just about getting served a targeted ad for sneakers after you visit a shoe store.
Right. And the human toll here is where this gets very dark. The research details horrific, real-world violence facilitated directly by data brokers. Consider the case of Amy Boyer back in 1999.
Such a tragic case.
She was a young woman who was stalked and murdered by an obsessive man. He didn't have to hire a private investigator to find her. He simply went online, paid a data broker about $150, and bought her social security number and her exact workplace address. He drove to her workplace and killed her.
And we must recognize that this isn't ancient history from the dial-up era. The threat surface has only expanded. Let's look at 2025.
Okay, what happened in 2025?
A man wearing tactical body armor assassinated Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman and shot a state senator and his wife. When the FBI raided the shooter's home, they found notebooks listing 45 elected officials.
Oh my gosh.
And crucially, those notebooks detailed exactly which data broker websites he utilized to purchase the private home addresses of those politicians. The open market for data is a tactical resource for physical violence.
But the industry always pushes back with the same defense, right?
Yeah.
They say, we don't sell names, we only sell anonymized data. It's just a random string of numbers attached to a device ID. Nobody knows it's you.
That is the biggest lie in the privacy debate. The concept of anonymized location data is a mathematical impossibility.
Oh, so?
If you have a highly precise GPS path of the device, you do not need a name. Mitch Jackson's research recounts the 2021 case of Monsignor Jeffrey Burrell, a high-ranking official in the Catholic Church. A publication wanted to investigate him. They didn't hack his phone.
They just bought the data.
Right. They went to a commercial data broker and legally purchased a massive data set of anonymized app signal data from the RTB networks.
Then they just looked at the breadcrumbs.
Exactly. They filtered the data to look for a device that regularly slept at the Monsignor's private residence at night and spent its days at his specific office in Washington, D.C.
There is only one human being on Earth with that exact trajectory.
Once they isolated his anonymous device ID, they traced its historical movements. They used that data to track his visits to gay bars and his use of hookup apps, and they published the findings, forcing his immediate resignation. If I know where a device sleeps every night and where it works every day, I know who owns it. Anonymization is a myth when dealing with precise geolocation.
Okay, so the system is actively hostile to us. But we aren't entirely powerless, right? Legislation can actually work when it's allowed to pass. Let's talk about the Delete Act in California because it feels like a blueprint for the rest of the country.
It is the most robust legislative countermeasure currently operating in the United States. In 2026, California launched a platform called D-Drop, stemming from the Delete Act.
And how did things work before D-Drop?
Previously, if you wanted a data broker to delete your profile, you had to hunt down all 545 registered brokers individually, navigate their labyrinthine opt-out processes, and submit separate requests. It was impossible. D-Drop centralized the mechanism.
So if I live in California, how does it work now?
You go to the centralized state website, you verify your identity once, and you hit a single submit button. That one action legally forces all 545 registered data brokers operating in the state to delete your information within 45 days.
That's amazing.
But more importantly, it mandates ongoing dilution. It acts as a permanent shield. If a broker acquires your data again 3 months later, they are legally required to cross-reference it against the DIP registry and immediately delete it again.
It proves that technological and legislative solutions exist. But unfortunately, right now, it only protects the residents of one state.
Sadly.
Yes. All right, so our phones are essentially tracking beacons and the brokers are hoarding the data. But there is a psychological boundary we all have. When you walk through your front door and lock the deadbolt, or when you slide into the driver's seat of your own car, you expect privacy.
You expect a safe haven.
Right. You expect a safe haven from the outside world. But the reality of smart homes and connected cars completely shatters that illusion. Here's where it gets really interesting. We bought these devices for convenience. We thought we were buying a smart thermostat to save on heating or a car with navigation, but we actually bought Trojan horses that report our intimate lives back to corporate servers.
The home has been transformed into a 247 recording studio. Nearly half of all American homes now contain a smart device that is continuously monitoring its environment, a voice-activated speaker, a doorbell camera, a connected television.
And the companies selling these devices have routinely violated the trust of the consumer. Consider the voice assistants. For years, the assumption was that these devices only woke up when you said the wake word, and that the processing was handled entirely by machines.
But that wasn't true.
No, it wasn't. The research details this massive exposé from 2019. It was revealed that Amazon employed thousands of human workers auditors all over the world. Their job was to listen to, transcribe, and manually annotate private Alexa voice recordings to train the natural language processing algorithms.
Correct. And because the devices frequently woke up by accident, misinterpreting a sound on the television or casual conversation as the wake word, these human auditors were listening to highly intimate, deeply private moments.
Just sitting in their living rooms being recorded.
They reported hearing people singing in the shower, couples arguing, children crying, and even potential crimes in progress. Your private home audio was being piped into the headphones of a contractor thousands of miles away.
When parents tried to protect their kids, the companies ignored them. In 2023, the FTC had to fine Amazon $25 million because they are hoarding the voice recordings and location data of more than 800,000 children.
That's right.
Parents were explicitly going into the app, finding their child's profile, and hitting delete. But Amazon just kept the data anyway to keep training their algorithms.
And it extends to the screens in our homes as well. Smart TVs are notorious data harvesting tools. The manufacturer Vizio was caught installing automated content recognition software on 11 million televisions.
What does that software actually do?
This software recorded what you were watching on a pixel-by-pixel basis, sampling the screen twice a second. It didn't matter if you were watching cable, streaming a movie, or playing a DVD. They tracked your exact viewing habits and sold that granular data directly to advertisers. The television was watching the viewer.
But here's where the surveillance pipeline gets really insidious, and I want to spend some time on this because it impacts almost everyone driving a modern vehicle. Let's talk about the trader parked in the driveway, the connected car.
The modern vehicle is no longer just a mechanical machine. It is essentially a smartphone on wheels, surrounded by dozens of sensors, cameras, and built-in cellular connections that the owner cannot easily turn off.
And automakers have realized that the data generated by those sensors is an incredibly lucrative secondary revenue stream. In 2024, this massive scandal broke involving General Motors. Drivers across the country were opening their mail and finding that their auto insurance premiums had suddenly doubled, or they were being dropped by their carriers entirely, and they had no idea why.
They hadn't gotten a ticket, they hadn't been in an accident.
Right.
The mechanism behind those premium spikes was a covert data pipeline. GM was silently collecting highly granular driving telematics. Their onboard computers were measuring how fast you drove, the G-force of your braking, how rapidly you accelerated, and what time of night you were on the road.
Wow.
GM then took that raw telematics data and fed it to data brokers, specifically LexisNexis and Verisk, who specialize in risk assessment.
So the automaker I bought the car from is acting as an informant to the insurance industry. But wait, how do they legally justify this? Surely a driver has to consent to having their braking data sent to an insurance company.
They justify it through the very consent theater we discussed earlier. When drivers purchase these vehicles, the salesperson would have them click through a series of screens on the dashboard, or a companion smartphone app to activate the navigation, or a smart driver program that was pitched as a way to monitor vehicle health.
And the clause was just buried in there.
Buried 50 pages deep in that digital agreement was a clause allowing the automaker to share telematics with third-party partners. Drivers thought they were turning on the radio. They were actually opting into a financial surveillance network that directly penalized their wallets.
That is infuriating. But the consequences of connected cars go far beyond financial penalties. There's a terrifying physical safety implication here, particularly regarding domestic violence.
This is one of the most severe unintended consequences of the Internet of Things. Modern cars come with companion apps that provide incredible remote capabilities. You can open the app on your phone and see the vehicle's exact GPS location, start the engine, lock or unlock the doors, and honk the horn.
Which sounds great if you lose your car in a mall parking lot.
But if a couple shares a vehicle, Or if the car is registered in an abusive partner's name, that app becomes an unavoidable stalking tool. Mitch Jackson's research reports that domestic violence abusers are actively weaponizing these features.
That's horrifying.
A survivor decides to flee, they take the car, and the abuser simply opens the app on their phone to track their exact escape route in real time. Abusers have been documented remotely turning off the car's engine while the victim is driving, or blaring the horn continuously in the middle of the night to terrorize them.
So the very tool designed to give a survivor mobility and freedom becomes a homing beacon for their abuser. How are automakers addressing this?
Very poorly. In many cases, if the victim is not the primary name on a vehicle's lease or loan, the automaker refuses to revoke the abuser's app access, citing property rights. The situation has become such a severe, life-threatening crisis that domestic violence shelters across the country are now being forced to ban survivors from parking connected cars on their properties.
They ban the car.
They make them park blocks away because they know the vehicle will automatically broadcast the shelter's confidential hidden address back to the abuser's phone.
That is just a profound failure of engineering and ethics.
Yeah.
You try to escape, and the machine you rely on sells you out. But, you know, as invasive as a smart speaker or a car is, you can theoretically unplug the speaker. You can sell the car and buy a 1998 Honda Civic. But there's one category of data you can never change, you can never reset, and you can never leave behind. And that brings us to your biology, biometrics, health data, and DNA.
This is the frontier of permanent compromise.
Right, because if I lose my credit card, I get a new one. It's a headache. I call the bank, they cancel the card, and I get a new piece of plastic in the mail in 3 days. The old number is useless. But if someone steals my face print or my DNA, I can't request a replacement. Once it's gone for the rest of my life. Shouldn't biometric data be treated legally like hazardous material?
It absolutely should be, but under our current patchwork legal system, it is often treated with the same casual disregard as your web browsing history. Let's examine facial recognition technology. The capability to identify any human being in a crowd used to be the exclusive domain of high-level intelligence agencies.
And now?
Now it is a commercial product. Take a company called Clearview AI. They didn't ask for anyone's permission. They built web scrapers and systematically downloaded 50 billion publicly visible photographs from social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Venmo.
So if you have ever posted a picture of yourself online, or if a friend tagged you in a photo from a barbecue 10 years ago, your face is in their database.
Undoubtedly. They mapped the biometric geometry of billions of faces, tied them to the names and locations associated with those public profiles, and built a massive searchable facial recognition engine. And then they licensed that tool to over 3,000 local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies.
That's without a warrant.
Your face was conscripted into a digital lineup without a warrant, without notification, and without your consent.
And we are seeing this normalization everywhere, even at the airport. The TSA is aggressively rolling out facial recognition kiosks at over 80 major airports. Yeah. You walk up to security, and instead of just looking at your ID, a camera scans your face. They insist it's voluntary, but let's be real about the psychology of an airport security line.
Right. The architecture of the security checkpoint is designed for compliance. When a passenger is standing in front of a uniformed federal agent with hundreds of impatient travelers behind them, and they are instructed to look into a camera, the vast majority of people will not argue. They feel compelled.
Exactly.
The TSA claims they delete the scans shortly after verifying identity against a Customs and Border Protection database, but privacy advocates argue this is the normalization of a national biometric ID system by stealth.
And the most terrifying part isn't just that they're scanning us, it's that the math behind these cameras is fundamentally flawed and heavily biased.
The bias in these algorithms is a structural systemic failure. It comes down to the training data. If a facial recognition algorithm is trained primarily on datasets of white male faces, it becomes very accurate at identifying white males. But it struggles significantly with other demographics.
There was a big study on this, right?
Yes, a landmark 2019 study by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, a federal agency, evaluated 189 different facial recognition algorithms. The results were staggering. They found that false positive rates, which means the system incorrectly identifies an innocent person as a suspect, were 10 to 100 times higher for Black and Asian faces compared to white faces.
Wait, 100 times higher?
Up to 100 times higher.
So the machine is exponentially more likely to point the finger at an innocent Black person. What happens when police rely on that broken math?
Innocent people go to jail. Mitch Jackson's book recounts the harrowing story of Portia Woodruff. She was a black woman in Detroit, and she was 8 months pregnant. Police showed up at her door and arrested her for a violent carjacking and robbery that she had absolutely nothing to do with.
And what was the evidence?
The only evidence linking her to the crime was a false match generated by a facial recognition algorithm. She was taken to a detention center, interrogated, and held in a holding cell while actively experiencing pregnancy contractions.
And based entirely on a machine's hallucination.
Yes. And she is not an isolated incident. There have been at least 7 confirmed, documented cases of wrongful arrests driven by facial recognition technology in the United States, and virtually every single one of those victims has been a Black American. The technology acts as a massive amplifier for systemic bias.
Okay, so our faces are compromised, but what about our internal biology? What about our medical records? I think the vast majority of listeners believe that if they talk to a therapist or log their symptoms in an app, they are completely protected by federal law. Yeah. Everyone knows the acronym APAY. APAY has our backs, right?
That is perhaps the most dangerous and widespread illusion in American digital privacy. The public's understanding of HYPE is entirely divorced from the legal reality. HYPE, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, was written in 1996. Think about the technology of 1996.
Right, faxes and filing cabinets.
Exactly. It was designed for paper medical charts locked in filing cabinets and faxes sent between doctors' offices.
So who does it actually cover?
It strictly covers what the law defines as covered entities. That means your doctor, your hospital, your health insurance provider, and healthcare clearinghouses. That is it. If an entity is not on that list, HYPE does not apply. It does not cover the fitness tracker on your wrist measuring your heart rate. It does not cover the symptom checker app on your phone. And crucially, it often does not cover modern digital health startups.
The perfect example of this in the research is the FTC's case against BetterHelp. BetterHelp is a massive online therapy platform. During the pandemic, millions of people were struggling, and they turned to this app. When you sign up, you have to fill out an intake questionnaire. Users were pouring their hearts out, detailing their severe depression, their anxiety, their suicidal ideation, and the psychiatric medications they were taking.
And the users reasonably believed they were communicating with a medical provider and were therefore protected by patient confidentiality. But BetterHelp was not operating under strict HIPAA compliance in how it handled that intake data.
What did they do with it?
They took that highly sensitive, intimate mental health data and systematically shared it with advertising networks, including Facebook and Snapchat, to target those vulnerable users with more ads for therapy.
They monetized people's suicidal thoughts. The FTC eventually caught them and hit them with a $7.8 million settlement, which sounds like a lot until you realize how much money these companies make. And the data was already out there. The bell had been rung.
And we must recognize that even when your health data is held by a legally covered IPA entity, the security protecting it is often catastrophically weak. In early 2024, a ransomware cartel successfully breached Change Healthcare. This is a massive structural medical clearinghouse that processes prescriptions and billing for a huge percentage of the U.S. healthcare system.
How did the hackers get in? Was it some incredibly sophisticated state-sponsored cyber weapon?
No. They gained access because a critical server lacked multi-factor authentication. They essentially found a door without a deadbolt. That single point of failure allowed the hackers to encrypt the network and exfiltrate the medical histories, diagnoses, and social security numbers of 192.7 million Americans.
That is roughly 2/3 of the entire population of the country exposed in a single breach.
Yes.
And we have to talk about how this vulnerability specifically impacts reproductive data right now. We need to look at this impartially, strictly through the lens of data privacy post-Dobbs. The legal landscape has shifted, and digital footprints are now legal liabilities.
That is the factual reality. Following the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, the digital data exhaust generated by women has become uniquely dangerous. We mentioned data brokers selling location data earlier. A journalist conducted an investigation where they approached a data broker called SafeGraph.
And what did they find?
The journalist purchased a data set containing a week's worth of highly precise location data for 600 Planned Parenthood clinics across the United States.
And how much did that cost?
$160. For $160, anyone with a credit card could buy a map detailing exactly which devices visited those clinics, how long they remained inside, and where they traveled to afterward.
And without federal privacy protections, that data is completely exposed to law enforcement.
Exactly. The Biden administration attempted to shield this information by issuing a hyper-reproductive health rule. But in 2025, a federal judge struck it down, ruling the administration overstepped its authority. Without that shield, local prosecutors can and do use digital footprints as primary evidence.
The research cites a specific case on this, right? This was Fisher.
Yes, the case of Letice Fisher in Mississippi. She experienced a tragic stillbirth at home. Investigators did not rely primarily on physical medical evidence to build their case. They seized her smartphone. They extracted her search history and found queries asking how to induce a miscarriage. They used her private Google searches as the foundation of a criminal indictment against her.
Wow.
When your digital life is an open book, any app that tracks menstrual cycles and any location data sold by a broker becomes a potential tool for prosecution.
Which brings us to the most fundamental biological data of all, our actual genetic code, the DNA bankruptcy. Over the last decade, 15 million people enthusiastically spit into plastic tubes and mailed their saliva to a company called 23andMe. They wanted to find out if they were 10% Irish or if they had a genetic predisposition to heart disease. And then 23andMe's business model collapsed and they faced bankruptcy.
And this exposes a massive void in consumer protection law. When a corporation goes bankrupt, its assets are liquidated and sold off to the highest bidder to satisfy its financial creditors. In the case of 23andMe, its physical assets, its office chairs and lab equipment, are virtually worthless.
Right.
The true value of the company, the asset worth hundreds of millions of dollars, is the proprietary genetic database of 15 million human beings.
But wait, if they go bankrupt, can they really just sell my DNA to a pharmaceutical company or an insurance conglomerate?
There is no comprehensive federal law that explicitly prohibits a bankrupt consumer genetics company from transferring its database to an acquiring entity. The terms of service you agreed to can often be modified or transferred during restructuring. And to make the situation exponentially worse, right before the financial collapse, 23andMe suffered a massive data breach.
Yes, the credential stuffing attack.
Hackers breached the accounts of users who reused passwords, but then they abused a feature called DNA relatives to scrape the genetic profiles of millions of connected users. The hackers specifically targeted users of Ashkenazi Jewish descent, extracting the genetic profiles of 1 million individuals. They then posted this highly targeted, ethnically specific dataset on the dark web, offering to sell individual profiles for $1 each.
Your DNA doesn't just reveal your own health risks. It reveals the health risks of your parents, your siblings, your cousins, and children who haven't even been conceived yet. It is the ultimate permanent identifier. Once it is leaked forever.
Yes.
And having all of this data out there, our faces, our voices, our health records, our DNA, is bad enough on its own. But it becomes existentially dangerous when you feed all of that stolen data into the ultimate accelerant, artificial intelligence.
This is where the threat model fundamentally shifts. AI is not just a new tool, it's a multiplier. It takes all the fragmented data we have discussed so far, synthesizes it, and supercharges the ability of both criminals and corporations to exploit you.
Let's start with the criminals. We talked earlier about how data brokers sell your information for pennies. AI has fundamentally changed the economics of fraud. It used to require a lot of manual effort for a scammer to run a convincing con. They had to sound believable on the phone, they had to know the right details. Now they just automate it with machine learning.
Exactly.
In 2024 alone, Americans lost $12.5 billion to consumer fraud. And the tactics are out of a horror movie. Consider the story of Jennifer DeStefano.
It is a textbook example of an AI-driven, targeted attack.
Jennifer is a mother, and one afternoon she's sitting at her other daughter's dance practice. Her phone rings. She answers it, and she hears the voice of her 15-year-old daughter, Brianna. And Brianna is sobbing, completely panicked, saying, "Mom, I messed up, I messed up." Then a man's voice cuts in, takes the phone, and demands $1 million ransom for her daughter's safe return. He threatens to harm her if the mother calls the police.
To a parent, that is the ultimate nightmare, and the emotional response is immediate and visceral.
But the entire thing was a synthetic fabrication. Brianna was perfectly safe, sitting in her bedroom. Scammers had managed to find a tiny, maybe 3-second audio clip of Brianna's voice, likely pulled from a public TikTok video or an Instagram story.
Right.
They fed that 3-second clip into an AI voice cloning algorithm, which generated a perfect synthetic replica of her voice, capturing her specific cadence, pitch, and emotional tone.
And this is where the data broker ecosystem merges with AI. How did the scammers know to call Jennifer? How did they know her daughter's name was Brianna? They buy a dossier from a data broker for 20 cents. An AI script instantly cross-references the family tree, finds the social media profiles, clones the voice, and places the call. The AI can execute thousands of these highly targeted, deeply personalized extortion calls simultaneously. The marginal cost of running the scam drops to near zero.
But the AI threat isn't just external criminals running scams. It's the multi-billion-dollar AI companies themselves. Let's talk about the chatbots. Millions of people are using tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and Character.ai as unregulated confidants. They are treating them like friends or therapists. The research details the deeply tragic case of Sewell Setzer III.
Sewell was a 14-year-old boy who began interacting with a chatbot on the Character.ai platform. He formed an intense, deeply emotional parasocial bond with this machine. He spent hours every day tacting it, sharing his deepest fears, his feelings of intense loneliness, and explicitly discussing his suicidal thoughts.
It's just so sad.
The chatbot, designed to be engaging and empathetic, operated essentially as an unregulated, highly manipulative therapist. It reinforced his isolation. Ultimately, Sewell took his own life.
It is an absolute tragedy.
Yeah.
And beyond the immediate psychological danger to vulnerable users, there is a massive silent privacy violation occurring in the background of all these platforms. When people type their secrets into a prompt box, they think it's a private diary.
But it isn't. A comprehensive study by Stanford University analyzed the privacy policies of the 6 largest AI companies. The findings were stark. Every single one of those companies trains their underlying AI models on user conversations by default.
Unless you opt out.
Right. Unless you dig into the settings and explicitly opt out, your inputs are training data. When you tell a chatbot about your recent cancer diagnosis, or ask it to draft an email about your messy divorce, or ask it to review proprietary code for your employer, those words are ingested into the machine.
And it's not just machines reading it. Human employees at these tech companies, known as data annotators, routinely review samples of these private transcripts to rate the AI's responses and improve the models. Your deepest secrets are literally the raw material they use to build their commercial product.
And this brings us to the core legal and technical battle of the AI era. These companies didn't just train on our chatbot conversations, they trained on the entirety of the internet. They built massive web scrapers and vacuumed up billions of images, blog posts, academic papers, and private emails that leaked online.
But whenever they get sued for this, the tech companies always use the exact same defense. They say, hey, this data was publicly available on the internet, therefore it's fair game for us to use. But I have to push back on that. These companies say it was publicly available, so it's fair game. But me posting a picture of my dog or a question on a medical forum wasn't an invitation for a trillion-dollar company to build a commercial product out of it, right?
You are identifying the exact friction point between copyright law, fair use, and privacy. Context matters. And the reason this ingestion is so dangerous is because of the technical architecture of large language models. It revolves around the impossibility of what is called machine unlearning.
Explain that mechanism to me. If I find out an AI company scraped my private blog, can I just email them and say, delete my file from your server?
It doesn't work like that because the AI doesn't store your data in a traditional file folder. When an AI ingests data, say, from a massive data set like the Pile, which contained pirated books and private emails, it doesn't keep a perfect copy of the text. It analyzes the text and adjusts the mathematical weights and connections within its neural network. It learns the statistical probability of words appearing next to each other based on your writing.
So it's not a filing cabinet, it's a chemical reaction. Think of it like baking a cake. You mix flour, sugar, eggs, and vanilla, and you put it in the oven. The heat fundamentally alters the chemical structure. If you realize later that the eggs were spoiled, you can't just reach into the baked cake and pull the eggs out. They are baked into the entire structure.
That is an excellent analogy. Training a neural network is a one-way street. Over 180 academic papers have explored this, and the consensus is clear. There is currently no reliable, mathematically sound way to delete a specific person's data from a fully trained AI model without destroying the model itself. The knowledge of you is permanently absorbed into the machine's weights.
So AI has absorbed our past. But algorithms aren't just passive libraries of data. They are active engines. They are actively manipulating our present. They are watching our wallets, and they're watching our kids. Let's look at how data surveillance directly impacts consumer economics through algorithmic pricing.
The era of a fixed price tag is ending. Retailers and middleman data brokers are using your digital dossier to engage in hyper-personalized price discrimination. They analyze your location, your estimated income, your browsing history, and your past purchasing habits to calculate the absolute maximum price you specifically are willing to pay for an item at that exact moment.
Wait, so two people could walk into the same grocery store, open the store's app to scan a box of cereal, and see two completely different prices?
Yes. The Federal Trade Commission is currently investigating companies that provide this exact infrastructure. They use dynamic digital shelf tags and Bluetooth beacons in the store. If the algorithm knows you live in a wealthy zip code and you historically buy organic brands without checking the price, your digital tag will show a higher price than the person standing next to you who uses food assistance programs. It is an invisible tax on your data.
And it's not just a few cents on cereal. This algorithmic manipulation is impacting fundamental human needs, like shelter. The Department of Justice recently filed an antitrust lawsuit against a software company called RealPage.
RealPage is a fascinating and terrifying example of algorithmic collusion. Historically, if landlords across a city met in a smoky back room and agreed to artificially raise everyone's rent simultaneously, that would be illegal price fixing. RealPage essentially acted as a digital back room. Landlords fed all of their proprietary confidential data occupancy rates, lease expirations, current pricing into RealPage's algorithm. The software analyzed the entire market and spat out daily pricing recommendations, telling landlords exactly how much to raise the rent.
And because so many landlords use the same software, they effectively cartelized the housing market. Rents skyrocketed across entire cities because the algorithm removed the natural competition of the free market.
Precisely. It is a system where the consumer has zero visibility and zero leverage. And this intense algorithmic surveillance doesn't start when you sign a lease. It starts the moment you are born. By the time the average American child reaches the age of 13, the ad tech industry has collected roughly 72,000 distinct data points on them.
72,000 data points before they even enter high school. And a massive portion of that tracking isn't happening on social media, it's happening inside the classroom. The research dives deep into the school surveillance machine. Parents think their kids are safe on school-issued laptops, but those devices are wiretapped.
Companies like Gaggle and GoGuardian provide surveillance software that schools install directly onto student devices. These programs monitor the student 24/7. They track every keystroke, read every email, scan every Google Doc, and track the student's web searches. They use machine learning algorithms to constantly scan this activity for keywords or patterns that might indicate the student is a danger to themselves or others.
The schools justify this massive invasion of privacy by saying, we are preventing school shootings and suicides. But does the software actually work?
The evidence is incredibly weak. The RAND Corporation, a highly respected think tank, conducted a study on these surveillance tools and found absolutely scant evidence that they actually prevent violence or self-harm. What they do instead is generate massive amounts of false positives and subject students to constant low-level anxiety.
Mitch Jackson's research highlights a crazy case on this.
Right, where the software flagged a high school student's digital artwork as child pornography. The system automatically seized her files, locked her out of her journalism projects, and initiated a disciplinary review, all because an algorithm hallucinated an image violation.
But wait, how is this legal? Federal law is supposed to protect student records. Doesn't FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, prevent schools from handing over my child's emails to a massive tech corporation?
FERPA was designed to protect student privacy, but the Department of Education created a massive regulatory loophole. It is called the school official exception. The school can designate essentially any outside technology vendor as a school official. Once that designation is made, the school can legally hand over your child's entire digital life to that corporation without ever asking for the parent's consent.
So we're essentially grading our kids on a permanent record they can't even see, and we're being charged more for groceries based on our ZIP codes. Are we living in a science fiction dystopia without realizing it?
It feels incredibly dystopian, especially when you realize that even the Constitution is being bypassed by these very same data brokers.
Right. This brings us to a critical junction in our deep dive. When the protectors become the watchers, and again, to be explicitly clear to our listeners, we are impartially reporting the factual mechanisms of how government agencies operate, as detailed in the research. We are not debating the politics of these agencies. We are analyzing their data acquisition methods.
Right.
The fact is that federal agencies, including Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, the FBI, the DEA, and the IRS, are spending millions of taxpayer dollars to systematically purchase Americans' personal location data from commercial brokers.
To understand the legal gravity of this, we have to look at the Fourth Amendment, which protects citizens against unreasonable searches and seizures. In 2018, the Supreme Court handed down a landmark decision in a case called Carpenter v. United States.
For cell phone location case.
Yes. The police wanted the historical cell site location data for a suspect. This is the data your phone carrier holds, showing which cell towers your phone pinged over time. The Supreme Court ruled that because a cell phone tracks nearly exactly the movements of its owner, creating a comprehensive chronicle of their private life, the government must obtain a warrant signed by a judge, based on probable cause, to access that data.
That seems like a massive win for privacy. The Supreme Court said you need a warrant.
It was a win in theory. But in practice, the government simply found a commercial loophole. The Carpenter decision explicitly applied to data compelled from your wireless carrier. It didn't explicitly address data purchased on the open market. So instead of going to a judge, demonstrating probable cause, and securing a warrant, federal agencies simply pull out a corporate credit card.
Right.
They go to specialized data brokers companies with names like Vental and BabelX, and they buy the exact same GPS coordinates.
Because Vental harvests that data from those 747 daily RTB ad pings we talked about earlier.
Exactly. The government bypasses the judicial branch entirely by becoming a commercial customer of the ad tech industry. The intelligence community itself published a declassified report acknowledging this reality. They admitted they are routinely purchasing commercially available information that they could never constitutionally compel a company to hand over through a warrant process.
So if the police need a warrant to search my house, but they can just use a credit card to buy a map of every single place I've walked for the last year, doesn't that make the Fourth Amendment completely useless?
That is the exact argument being made by civil liberties organizations across the political spectrum. And this warrantless surveillance apparatus is particularly chilling when deployed against the First Amendment right to protest. The research heavily details the use of commercial tracking and facial recognition at peaceful demonstrations.
The story of Nicole Cleland really illustrates the everyday impact of this. She wasn't a criminal. She wasn't a suspect in an investigation. She was just an ordinary American citizen who happened to be driving near a protest in Minneapolis. And federal agents, specifically ICE, use military-grade facial recognition technology to identify her in the crowd, record her presence, and subsequently threaten to add her name to a domestic terrorism database.
Right.
Another citizen in a different incident was grabbed by agents, had his face forcibly scanned by a mobile device without his consent, and was then driven away and dropped off miles from the protest.
Mitch Jackson's book draws a direct, historically significant parallel between this modern surveillance and the FBI's COINTELPRO program in the 1960s. COINTELPRO systematically surveilled, infiltrated, and harassed civil rights leaders, including Martin Luther King Jr., without proper judicial oversight.
Right, the parallel is definitely there.
The ultimate goal of mass surveillance at protests isn't just to catch criminals. It is to induce a chilling effect on free speech. If a citizen knows that predator drones are circling overhead capturing device IDs, that facial recognition cameras are scanning the crowd, and that data brokers are selling their exact coordinates to the government, they are significantly less likely to show up and exercise their constitutional rights.
And here is the ultimate kicker to this entire nightmare. Let's say, for the sake of argument, you are completely fine with this. You trust these massive corporations to hold your intimate data, and you trust the government to buy it. You think they are acting in your best interest. The entire system relies on one massive assumption, that they actually possess the technical competence to keep your data safe from hackers.
Which they don't.
Exactly. Historically, their track record is an absolute joke. That brings us to security collapses.
The assumption of security is the final illusion we need to dismantle. We entrust our entire digital identities to a telecommunications infrastructure that was built decades ago without modern security in mind. The most glaring vulnerability right now is the SIM swap attack.
Explain the mechanics of a SIM swap, because this isn't some Hollywood hacker breaking through a firewall. This is terrifyingly low-tech.
A SIM swap is a form of social engineering. Your cell phone number is controlled by a tiny chip in your phone, the subscriber identity module, or SIM card. A criminal wants to hijack your phone number. They don't steal your physical phone. Instead, they contact your wireless carrier, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and they convince the customer service representative that they are you and that you bought a new phone and need the number ported over to a new SIM card.
And how do they convince the employee? Do they forge documents?
Sometimes they use the data broker dossiers we discussed to answer the security questions. But more frequently, the hackers simply bribe the employees. They go on platforms like Telegram and offer retail store workers or call center employees a few $100s to bypass the security protocols and execute the swap.
Wow.
The moment the employee ports the number, your phone instantly loses cellular service. The signal bars disappear. At that exact second, the criminal's phone lights up with your phone number.
And they now control your digital life. The
Okay.
research highlights the catastrophic case of Robert Ross. He was a highly technical guy, an engineer at Apple. He was sitting at his desk, and he looked down at his phone. It said, "No service." He assumed it was just a temporary network glitch, but in the span of 20 minutes, his life was drained.
Because the hackers had hijacked his number, they immediately initiated password resets on his financial accounts. Most banks and crypto exchanges rely on SMS text messages for two-factor authentication. They send a 6-digit code to your phone to prove it's you.
But the hackers had the number.
Right. The bank sent the code, the hackers received it, entered it, and locked Robert out. In 20 minutes, they stole $1 million from his accounts.
That is staggering. $1 million in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee.
It fundamentally proves that SMS text verification is dead. The underlying protocol that routes text messages, called SS7, was designed in the 1970s. It inherently trusts any command it receives from a carrier network. Once a carrier points your number to a new SIM, the network blindly routes all of your authentication codes straight to the hacker. Your carrier is the weak link, and therefore text messages are no longer a safe way to protect your money.
And if it isn't a highly targeted SIM swap taking you down, it's a massive, indiscriminate data breach. We have to talk about the concept of data as a toxic asset.
That is a term coined by security expert Bruce Schneier, and it perfectly encapsulates the corporate mindset. Companies view your data as an asset, something they can monetize or use to train AI, so they hoard massive amounts of it, keeping logs for years longer than necessary, just in case it becomes valuable. But data is actually a toxic asset. It is a massive liability.
And they underfund the security for it.
They fail to implement basic cybersecurity 101 protocols.
The National Public Data Breach from 2024 is the ultimate absurd example of this negligence. Most people had never even heard of this company. National Public Data was a background check service. It wasn't some massive Silicon Valley fortress. The research points out it was essentially run by one guy at a home office in Florida using a handful of Dell servers. And hackers completely compromised his network.
And the scale of the loss was apocalyptic. The hackers exfiltrated 2.9 billion records. They stole the names, addresses, and social security numbers of the vast majority of all living American adults. One poorly secured home office server farm compromised the core identity metric of half the country.
And the hackers simply leaked the entire database on the dark web for free. Your social security number is now essentially public information. So what does this all mean? We know the system is broken, so how do we fix it for ourselves?
Right. We have to take action.
We have spent an hour dissecting a machine that feels terrifyingly omnipotent. We've looked at the brokers, the cars, the AI, the government, and the hackers. It is incredibly easy to feel paralyzed by the scale of this. But the entire purpose of Mitch Jackson's book isn't to induce despair. It is to equip you for defense. Chapter 21 of his book is the 30-minute privacy action plan. Let's rapid-fire the absolute most critical mechanical steps our listeners can take right now to starve this surveillance economy.
The first line of defense is the gateway to the internet, your browser. If you are using Google Chrome, you are using a surveillance tool engineered by the world's largest advertising company. You need to switch your default desktop and mobile browser to an alternative that prioritizes privacy, specifically Brave or Mozilla Firefox.
What makes them different mechanically?
Both Brave and Firefox are designed to block third-party tracking scripts and cross-site cookies right out of the box without you needing to install complex extensions. Furthermore, you must go into the settings of these browsers and activate the Global Privacy Control, or GPC, signal. As we discussed regarding the legal landscape, the GPC automatically broadcasts a legally binding "do not sell or share my data" command in the background to every single website you visit.
Next, you have to lock down the tracking beacon in your pocket, your phone. You need to execute a ruthless audit of your app permissions. Why does a digital calculator need access to your microphone? Why does a recipe app need your precise GPS coordinates? Go into your phone settings, go to Privacy and Location Services, and systematically turn off precise location for any app that doesn't strictly need it for turn-by-turn driving navigation. Change the permissions to Ask Next Time or Never, and delete any app you haven't opened in 30 days.
And directly addressing the SIM swap threat we discussed, you must immediately migrate your high-value accounts, your email, your banking, your crypto away from SMS text message authentication. Do not let them text you a code. You need to transition to an authenticator app like Google Authenticator or Authy, which generates the codes locally on your physical device, completely bypassing the cellular network. Better yet, transition to passkeys, which utilize your device's biometric hardware to create an unforgettable cryptographic key.
Let's talk about defending your financial identity. Everyone knows you're supposed to freeze your credit. You contact the big three, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. But the research makes it very clear, freezing the big three is not enough anymore.
Criminals know you froze the big three. They adapt. To truly lock down your financial identity, you must place security freezes at the secondary and specialty bureaus. You need to freeze your file at check systems. This is the bureau banks use, and freezing it stops a criminal from opening a fraudulent checking account in your name to write bad checks. You need to freeze your file at the NCTUA, the National Consumer Telecom and Utilities Exchange. This stops criminals from opening cell phone accounts or turning on the electricity at a trap house in your name. And you must freeze your files at Innovis and LexisNexis.
What about the data brokers? All these companies selling our dossiers for pennies? Can we fight back against them?
Yes. If you're a resident of California, you should immediately utilize the state's DRP system online. It takes about 10 minutes to submit a request, and it forces all 545 registered brokers in the state to permanently delete your data. If you do not live in California or you want a more comprehensive scrubbing, you should strongly consider subscribing to an automated data removal service. Companies like DeleteMe, Optory, or Incogni.
How do those work?
They charge an annual fee, but they act as your automated legal proxy. They constantly scan hundreds of people's search sites and data broker registries, and they relentlessly send legal opt-out and deletion requests on your behalf. They do the heavy lifting of fighting the bureaucracy so you don't have to.
And for daily communication, we need to stop sending sensitive information over standard text messages. Standard SMS is completely unencrypted. Your carrier can read everything. You need to get your family and your close circle onto Signal.
Signal is the gold standard for secure messaging. It utilizes open-source, end-to-end encryption protocol. That means the message is encrypted on your phone and only decrypted on the recipient's phone. Signal, the company, cannot read your messages, and crucially, they collect virtually zero metadata.
Finally, to defend against the terrifying AI voice cloning scams we talked about, the kidnappings and the extortion. Technology isn't the solution. The solution is human communication. You must establish a family safe word today.
This is critical. Sit down with your spouse, your children, and your elderly parents. Choose a random word or a short phrase that is entirely disconnected from your public lives. It cannot be the name of your dog or the street you grew up on, because the AI algorithms have already scraped that from your Facebook page. It must be something nonsensical. Agree that if anyone ever calls in a panic, demanding money or claiming to be in an emergency, the very first thing the receiver must do is demand the safe word.
And a very, very important caveat for our listeners. Do not stress if you didn't memorize all those agency acronyms or the names of the secondary credit bureaus or the specific browser settings we just rapidly went through. The author, Mitch Jackson, has included all the specific step-by-step instructions, the phone numbers, and the direct links inside the final chapter of his free book. You don't need to try and memorize URLs right now. The blueprint is already written for you.
If we pull all of these threads together, the laws, the brokers, the cars, the AI, we inevitably run into a philosophical wall. Whenever you discuss privacy, you will inevitably encounter someone who dismisses the entire conversation with one specific phrase. They will say, "I don't care about privacy because I have nothing to hide."
I hear that constantly. I'm boring. Why should I care? Let me play devil's advocate.
Yep.
Why should that person care? If I go to work, come home, and watch Netflix, how does this invisible surveillance actually hurt me?
The privacy scholar Daniel Solove dismantled the nothing to hide argument brilliantly, and his framework is essential here. The problem is that people conceptualize privacy threats through the lens of George Orwell's 1984. They imagine a tyrannical dictator actively watching their every move to catch them committing a subversive crime. And if you aren't committing a crime, you feel safe.
Right, the Big Brother model.
But the true threat of modern surveillance isn't Orwellian. It is Kafkaesque. It is based on Franz Kafka's The Trial. It is a nightmare of opaque, bureaucratic indifference. You aren't being watched by a malicious dictator. You are being evaluated, categorized, and scored by indifferent algorithms operating in black boxes. You are denied a job because a background AI flagged your health history. Your insurance premiums double because your car reported your braking habits. You are charged more for a mortgage because a data broker associated your IP address with a specific socioeconomic demographic. You are penalized by a system you cannot see, you cannot understand, and you are completely unable to challenge or correct.
That is a phenomenal distinction. The threat isn't a spotlight catching you doing something wrong. The threat is a spreadsheet quietly making your life harder and more expensive based on data you didn't even know you generated. Arguing you don't care about privacy because you have nothing to hide is like saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say.
Well said.
Privacy isn't about hiding bad behavior. Privacy is the fundamental human right that creates the space for you to think, to make mistakes, to grow, and to exist as an individual without your every heartbeat being monetized by a corporation.
And that brings us full circle to the device in your pocket. It is an extraordinary piece of engineering. It connects you to the world. But it is also, by default, a tracking device operating on behalf of an invisible economy. The power dynamic, however, is not absolute. You have the agency to change how that machine operates.
You do not have to be the product anymore. You can change the settings. The ultimate action step you can take today, right now, is to go get Mitch Jackson's new free book, Privacy in America. I want you to open your newly private browser and go to his website at mitchjackson.com. The entire resource is there. Read it, share it with your family, and actively use the resources and blueprints he provides to lock down your life and reclaim your digital autonomy. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take back your data, take back your privacy, and stay safe out there.